The lobby of Riverside Private Clinic sparkled like the cover of a high-end lifestyle magazine. Glass walls, soft music, and the scent of fresh lavender drifting through the air. It was the kind of place built for comfort, designed to assure every visitor they were receiving the best of the best. That's exactly why Linda Whitmore came here. Linda, a woman who believed wealth bought not just luxury but respect, sat near the center of the waiting room, her fingers tapping sharply against the clipboard in her lap. The diamond rings on her hand caught the light, but nothing about Linda shined that morning. Her face, framed by perfectly styled blonde hair, twisted into a scowl every time the front desk answered the phone instead of calling her name. "Unbelievable," she muttered, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I made this appointment a week ago. You'd think they'd know how to handle paying clients." Her complaints didn't stop there. She glanced around the room, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the other patients. An elderly Latino couple holding hands, a young black mother bouncing a baby on her knee, a middle-aged man with an accent asking the receptionist about insurance coverage. Each glance only deepened Linda's frown. "This place has gone downhill," she whispered to herself. Riverside used to have standards. When a nurse finally called her name, Linda stood with purpose, her designer heels clicking across the floor like a warning. The nurse smiled politely, leading her to an exam room, but Linda barely acknowledged her, too busy checking her phone and sighing loudly at every small inconvenience, from the room's temperature to the generic paper gown folded neatly on the table. "I'm expecting Dr. Simmons," Linda said, her tone clipped. "I've seen him before." "Excellent, doctor. Very professional." The nurse hesitated. "Actually, doctor, Simmons is out today. You'll be seen by Dr. Ellis." Linda barely looked up. "Fine, as long as they know what they're doing. I don't have time for rookies." Minutes passed and Linda grew restless, muttering to herself about how much her insurance paid for this so-called premium care. When the door finally opened, Dr. Maya Ellis stepped in, wearing a calm smile and a crisp white coat. Maya was in her early 30s, confident but not arrogant, with a warmth that instantly made most patients feel at ease. But not Linda. Linda's smile vanished the moment she saw her. A black doctor standing where Linda expected someone else. Someone different. For a moment, Linda said nothing, her silence speaking louder than words. Maya extended her hand. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore. I'm Dr. Ellis. I'll be taking care of you today." Linda glanced at Maya's hand but didn't take it. Instead, she folded her arms across her chest. "Are you even qualified to work here? No offense, but I specifically asked for Dr. Simmons." Maya's smile didn't waver, though she felt the familiar sting beneath her skin, the same sting she'd felt too many times before. "Dr. Simmons is out, but I assure you, you're in good hands. I'm board certified in internal medicine and have been with Riverside for 5 years." Linda sniffed, unimpressed. "That's nice," she said, her voice syrupy with false politeness. "But I prefer doctors with more experience. Real expertise, you know." Maya's hand slowly dropped back to her side. "I understand," she said calmly, "but while you're here today, I'll make sure you receive excellent care. Now let's go over your symptoms." Linda sighed dramatically, barely listening as Maya asked about her health history. Each question was answered with clipped, impatient responses, Linda making it painfully clear she didn't trust the doctor standing in front of her. "Are you sure you understand my medications?" Linda asked, her tone sharp. "It's a complex case, and I'm not sure—" Well, no offense, but some doctors aren't quite up to date on newer treatments. Maya's fingers tightened slightly around her tablet, but her voice stayed calm. "I'm very familiar with your medications, Mrs. Whitmore. I've reviewed your file, and I'm confident we can address your concerns." Linda's smile stretched thin. "Well, I hope so. I'd hate to have to call the clinic director over something avoidable." Behind her calm exterior, Maya's heart ached. Not because Linda was difficult, but because this wasn't new. Being doubted, underestimated, second-guessed. It was a dance Maya had done her whole career, a routine choreographed by people who saw her skin before they saw her skill. But Maya also knew something Linda didn't. Maya knew her own worth. As the appointment continued, Maya handled every question, every thinly veiled insult, with grace. She explained Linda's test results clearly, adjusted her medications with confidence, and made sure every step of the process was transparent. Yet no matter how thorough or professional she was, Linda's face never softened. She couldn't see Maya as a capable doctor, only as someone who didn't fit the picture in her head. When the appointment ended, Linda snatched her handbag off the chair. "Well, let's hope this goes better than expected," she said, her smile brittle. "I'll follow up if things don't work out." Maya stayed professional, but the moment the door closed, she let out a quiet breath, allowing herself a brief moment of exhaustion. She knew what Linda saw when she walked in. Not a highly trained physician, but a black woman who didn't belong in Linda's version of Riverside Clinic. But Maya also knew this. Every time she stood in that room, every time she delivered care with skill and kindness, she wasn't just treating a patient. She was changing the picture, one appointment at a time. In the waiting room, Linda breezed past the front desk without so much as a thank you. As she reached for the door, her phone buzzed, but before she could answer, a sharp pain shot through her chest, stopping her in her tracks. Gasping for air, Linda stumbled back toward the desk, clutching her chest. "Help! I can't breathe!" she wheezed. Panic spread across the room as the receptionist paged the nearest doctor. The door to Maya's exam room flew open. "Dr. Ellis," the receptionist shouted. "We need you. Now!" Without hesitation, Maya ran toward Linda, her training kicking in faster than fear could take hold. Linda's face, pale with panic, registered the familiar figure rushing toward her. It was Maya, the doctor she had just insulted, the one she had doubted, the one she had treated like she was less. And now that same woman was the only one who could save her life. The door opened with a quiet click, and Dr. Daniel Carter stepped inside. His presence was the kind that filled a room without effort, polished, professional, and confident in the kind of quiet way that came from years of experience. He carried his tablet in one hand, a pen tucked neatly into the pocket of his coat, his posture upright, his expression calm. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Carter said, his voice smooth and steady. "I'm Dr. Daniel Carter, and I'll be reviewing your case today." Linda looked up from her phone, her expression shifting the moment her eyes landed on him. Her smile faded, replaced by the sharp squint of quiet judgment. She didn't say a word at first, just looked, assessing, calculating, measuring him against a picture in her head that didn't match what stood before her. Dr. Carter extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you," he said, but Linda didn't take it. Instead, she crossed her arms tightly over her chest, shifting in her seat like the chair itself had suddenly grown uncomfortable. "I was expecting someone more experienced," she said, her tone carefully polite, but sharp enough to draw blood. Dr. Carter's smile didn't flicker. "I assure you, Mrs. Whitmore, I've been practicing medicine for over a decade. I specialize in internal medicine and cardiology, and I've treated hundreds of cases just like yours." Linda gave a thin, humorless smile. "I'm sure you're very capable," she said, the word hanging in the air like an insult wrapped in fake kindness. "But I pay good money for my care. I expect to see the best." Dr. Carter remained calm, the warmth in his voice unwavering. "That's exactly what you're getting, ma'am." But Linda didn't hear him, or maybe she didn't want to. She glanced at the nurse standing quietly in the corner, as if expecting her to agree. When the nurse said nothing, Linda's smile vanished entirely. "You know," Linda said, her voice lowering into a conspiratorial whisper, "this whole place has changed. Used to be you could count on seeing doctors with real credentials. Now, they're just hiring for optics." The nurse's eyes widened in shock, her clipboard shaking slightly in her hands. But Dr. Carter stayed composed, though his heart clenched at the words he'd heard too many times before. Words that never lost their sting, no matter how successful he became. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Carter said gently, "I can assure you I was hired for my skill, not my skin color. I graduated top of my class, completed my residency at one of the most respected hospitals in the state, and have spent my entire career providing excellent care to every patient who walks through that door." Linda leaned back, her arms still crossed. "I'll take my chances with someone else," she muttered. "I didn't come here for a lecture. I came for a real doctor." Her words cut through the room like glass shattering on tile. The nurse gasped softly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. But Dr. Carter didn't flinch. He had learned a long time ago that some people couldn't see past their own reflection, no matter how much truth stood right in front of them. "That's your choice, Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But I hope, for your sake, that you realize real care isn't about what someone looks like. It's about what they know. And I know how to help you. Whether you let me or not is up to you." Linda snatched her handbag off the chair, muttering under her breath as she stormed past him. "Unbelievable," she hissed, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "I'll never be treated by someone so obviously unqualified." Dr. Carter stood quietly in the center of the room, the door swinging shut behind her, leaving only silence in her place. The nurse looked at him, her face filled with apology for something that wasn't her fault. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "She had no right to—" "It's okay, doctor," Carter interrupted gently. "It's not the first time." But as the nurse left the room, Dr. Carter stood alone for a moment, exhaling the breath he'd been holding. Because the truth was, it wasn't okay. It would never be okay. But if there was one thing Dr. Carter knew better than anyone, it was that dignity wasn't something anyone could hand him, and it wasn't something anyone could take away. Outside the room, Linda stormed down the hall, still muttering, still blind to the truth walking beside her. The truth that one day the very hands she refused to trust might be the only hands that could save her life. Leaving Riverside Clinic felt like a personal victory for Linda Whitmore. As she walked to her car, her heels clicking confidently against the pavement, she carried herself like a woman who had just dodged a disaster. She had no intention of letting a doctor like Daniel Carter touch her, not because of his credentials, but because of everything else. The way he looked, the way he didn't fit the image of the doctors Linda was used to trusting. In Linda's mind, a real doctor looked like Dr. Charles Johnson, the private physician she had seen for years, a man who wore expensive suits under his white coat, a man with silver hair and a reassuring voice that sounded like it belonged in a country club. That afternoon, Linda drove straight to Dr. Johnson's office, refusing to believe anyone else could handle her care. The receptionist greeted her warmly, offering bottled water and a glossy magazine to pass the time. Within minutes, Linda was escorted into the exam room. No waiting, no questions, no awkward explanations. Dr. Johnson entered with his familiar smile, barely glancing at her file before shaking her hand. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "always good to see you. What brings you in today?" Linda leaned back in the chair, her tone dripping with relief. "Just a little stomach discomfort. Nothing serious, I'm sure." Dr. Johnson nodded absently, flipping through her chart. "Probably just a touch of indigestion. Let's take a quick look." His examination lasted less than 5 minutes. A polite tap on her abdomen, a few standard questions, and a prescription scribbled out without a second thought. "Take these twice a day," he said. "Should clear you right up." Linda smiled, satisfied. This was how a doctor's visit should feel. Effortless, familiar, comfortable. As she left, she couldn't resist sharing her earlier frustration. "You know," Linda said with a dry laugh, "I went to Riverside this morning. They tried to stick me with some diversity hire. Barely out of med school, I'm sure." Dr. Johnson gave a non-committal smile, saying nothing, but Linda took it as agreement. "Good thing I came here instead," she added. "I trust you, because you actually know what you're doing." With that, she walked out, her pride fully restored. In her mind, she had made the right choice, choosing comfort over competence, familiarity over fairness. That evening, Linda's house glittered with warmth and wealth. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed through high-ceilinged rooms, and servers in crisp uniforms floated between guests, offering trays of hors d'oeuvres. Linda stood at the head of the dining table, her guests hanging on every word as she recounted her ordeal at the clinic. "Can you imagine?" Linda said, her voice full of dramatic flair. "They actually expected me to trust some affirmative action hire with my health. Not me. I walked right out and went straight to Dr. Johnson. Now there's a real doctor." The guests chuckled politely, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably but staying silent. Linda raised her glass, ready to toast to her own wisdom. But the moment her arm lifted, a sharp, searing pain shot through her chest. Her breath caught mid-sentence, her hand trembling as the glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. Her vision blurred, the room spinning as panic gripped her throat. She staggered backward, her guests' laughter turning into gasps of fear. "Linda!" someone shouted, but she couldn't respond. The pain tightened like a fist inside her chest, crushing every breath before it could fully form. Her knees buckled, sending her crashing to the floor. Voices swirled around her, frantic and disjointed. Someone called 911. Someone else tried to lift her head. But all Linda could think was, "My body is betraying me." The ambulance arrived within minutes, flashing lights painting her perfect house in streaks of red and blue. Paramedics swarmed around her, checking vitals, asking questions. But Linda couldn't answer. The pain swallowed her words. As they carried her toward the stretcher, she caught a glimpse of her guests standing in the doorway, their faces pale with shock. She had always been the woman who controlled the room, the one who set the tone, told the stories, made the rules. But now none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was surviving, and survival was about to depend on the very person she had rejected hours earlier. The ambulance doors swung open, and the paramedics rushed Linda inside, her skin pale, sweat beading along her forehead. Her heart pounded unevenly, each beat stumbling over the next, a cruel reminder that control, the thing she valued most, had completely slipped from her grasp. Through the haze of pain and fear, Linda could hear voices, sharp, professional, urgent. Machines beeped in rhythm with her faltering heart. Questions came fast, but her answers were broken and breathless. "Chest pain," one paramedic said. "Severe shortness of breath. Possible cardiac event." Linda tried to speak, but only a strangled whisper came out. Every breath felt like a battle. The ambulance burst through the emergency entrance, wheels squeaking against the polished floor. The bright lights overhead blurred together. Too harsh, too fast, too real. Somewhere between terror and exhaustion, Linda heard a door swing open, and then a voice she knew. "Let's get her stabilized." That voice stopped everything. Her stomach dropped, a cold wave of humiliation crashing into her, cutting through the pain. She knew that voice. She remembered it from just hours ago. The voice of the man she dismissed, the man she insulted, the man she said wasn't qualified to care for her. It was Dr. Carter. Linda's heart pounded harder, not just from the medical crisis threatening her life, but from the sheer dread of knowing who stood at her bedside. She forced her eyes open, blinking against the bright lights. And there he was, Dr. Daniel Carter, calm, composed, every inch the professional she refused to believe he could be. His hands moved quickly, attaching monitors, adjusting the oxygen mask, checking her vitals. There was no anger on his face, no trace of the insult she hurled at him earlier. All Linda saw was quiet focus, a doctor doing exactly what he was trained to do, save her life. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. What could she even say? "I'm sorry?" "I was wrong." The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, heavier than the pain itself. Dr. Carter's voice cut through her shame, steady and clear. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're having a serious cardiac event. We're going to take care of you, but I need you to stay calm and trust me." "Trust me." The words echoed inside her, sharp and painful, because trust was the very thing she had refused to give him, and now her survival depended on it. Linda tried to nod, but tears slid down the sides of her face instead. She couldn't speak. She couldn't apologize. All she could do was hold on, to the oxygen mask, to the edges of the stretcher, to the one man she had so easily dismissed, now standing between her and death. Dr. Carter didn't hesitate. His hands were steady, his voice calm, his focus unwavering. "Start the IV," he instructed the nurse. "Let's monitor her rhythm and prep for imaging. Time is everything here." Even in her panic, Linda could see it. The confidence in his every move, the quiet authority in his voice. He wasn't a diversity hire. He wasn't unqualified. He was exactly the doctor she needed, exactly the expert she had refused to see. The irony burned, bitter and heavy in her throat. Her fingers trembled as they reached toward him, not to push him away this time, but to hold on, to the very hands she once refused to shake. Dr. Carter glanced down, just for a second, his expression softening only slightly. There was no satisfaction in his eyes, no gloating, no, "I told you so." Just the quiet understanding of a man who had been here before, who had stood in this moment too many times, saving lives of people who would never respect the hands that saved them. "Stay with me, Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Carter said gently. "We're not done yet." Linda closed her eyes, surrendering to the hands she once doubted. Her life resting in the Kalinda lay flat on the hospital bed, her chest rising and falling unevenly beneath the oxygen mask. Each breath felt like it might be her last, and with every shallow gasp, the truth pressed down on her, like a weight she could no longer avoid. She was powerless. For the first time in a very long time, money meant nothing. Her influence couldn't save her. Her designer handbag, her last name, her connections, none of it mattered in this moment. The only thing standing between her and the edge of her own mortality was Dr. Daniel Carter, the very man she had dismissed as unworthy. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, the plastic mask fogging with every failed attempt, but her throat felt tight and no apology would come. Even if it could, what could she possibly say? Dr. Carter didn't ask for her words. He didn't wait for a confession. He focused only on the task at hand, saving her life. His voice carried through the room, calm and certain, giving orders that left no room for doubt. "Start a cardiac drip," he said firmly. "We need her stabilized before we move forward." Nurses responded without hesitation, following his lead with practiced precision. Linda's heart raced, not just from fear, but from shock. He commanded the room. His authority wasn't questioned. No one second-guessed him. He wasn't some diversity hire they pitied or tolerated. He was the one everyone trusted when life was on the line. The realization sank into Linda's chest with a heaviness all its own. The very competence she denied was now the only reason she was still alive. A nurse leaned over her, adjusting a monitor and speaking softly. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're lucky you came in when you did. If you'd ignored the symptoms much longer, you could have gone into full cardiac arrest." Linda's stomach turned, shame flooding her veins like ice water. She had almost killed herself, all because she refused to believe that a black doctor could possibly know better than the man she was comfortable with. Dr. Carter glanced toward her for a brief moment, his expression unreadable. He didn't smirk. He didn't remind her of her own words. He just continued working. Steady hands, focused mind, all while carrying the insult she threw at him like invisible weight on his back. "Her levels are dropping," a nurse called out. Dr. Carter didn't blink. "We're going to need to perform an emergency procedure," he said. "Page cardiology, but we can't wait for them to arrive. Let's prepare to insert the catheter." Linda's eyes widened in fear, tears spilling down her face. Every beep of the heart monitor felt louder than the last. The idea of surgery terrified her, but what terrified her even more was trusting Dr. Carter to save her. The same man she had called unqualified, the same hands she refused to shake. As they wheeled her toward the procedure room, Linda's breathing grew even more ragged. Panic clawed at her throat, but above it all, she heard his voice. "You're in good hands, Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Carter said softly. "I've got you." Tears blurred her vision. The very words she rejected earlier, the ones she laughed off and doubted, were now her only lifeline. She couldn't deny it anymore. He was not only qualified, he was her only hope. The lights overhead flickered past her as the team moved quickly. The operating room felt cold, sterile, and unforgiving. Linda shook, not just from fear, but from the weight of her own prejudice crashing down on her like a landslide, the mask covering her nose and mouth filled with anesthesia. Her eyelids grew heavy, her vision slipping into shadow. But just before the darkness took her, Linda's gaze locked onto Dr. Carter. He stood at the head of the table, calm, composed, professional, the very picture of the best care money could buy. And in that final moment before unconsciousness swept her away, Linda finally saw him clearly. Not as a black man she didn't trust, but as a doctor who never gave up on her, even when she gave up on him. Then the room faded into silence of the doctor she never wanted, but now couldn't live without. The first thing Linda felt when her eyes slowly opened was weakness. a kind of heaviness that pressed into her bones, making every breath feel like work. The soft beeping of a heart monitor filled the silence around her, a quiet reminder that she was still alive. Alive, because of the very doctor she had dismissed. She turned her head, throat dry, vision blurry, and there, standing at the foot of her bed, was Dr. Carter. His white coat hung neatly from his shoulders, his expression calm, focused, professional. The same man she had once called unqualified, now reading over the chart that told the story of how he saved her life. Their eyes met, and Linda felt a sharp sting of shame rise in her chest, even stronger than the pain that brought her here. She wanted to look away, to shrink under the covers, to disappear inside the folds of the hospital gown, but there was nowhere to hide. Dr. Carter spoke first, his voice even and measured. "You're lucky," he said, without a trace of gloating. "We caught it just in time." Linda's lips trembled as she swallowed hard, her pride crumbling beneath the weight of what she knew she had to say. I, her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "I misjudged you." The words hung in the air, fragile and uncomfortable, but honest in a way Linda wasn't used to. Dr. Carter didn't rush to comfort her. He didn't brush it off to make her feel better. He stood tall, the same man he had been all along, and simply said, "I hope this experience teaches you something." Linda felt the burn of humiliation and regret. But underneath that, something new. The understanding that she had built her entire sense of safety and superiority on a lie. A lie that said people like him couldn't possibly be the ones holding the answers. But the truth stood right there, reviewing her vitals, making sure her heart kept beating. Linda nodded slowly, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. "I was wrong about you," she whispered. "And not just you. People like you." Dr. Carter didn't thank her for the apology. It wasn't about him needing her approval. It was about her learning the lesson she had ignored for far too long. Over the next few days, as Linda lay in that bed, her body growing stronger, her mind wrestled with everything she thought she knew about the world and herself. She replayed every careless comment, every time she judged someone before they even spoke, every moment she chose comfort over truth. A nurse came by to check her vitals, adjusting the IV and fluffing her pillow. "You know," the nurse said casually, "Dr. Carter's one of the most accomplished physicians in this hospital. Patients fly in from out of state just to see him." Linda's stomach twisted at the thought. All her life she believed excellence wore a certain face, spoke with a certain voice, belonged to a certain kind of person. And yet the man she rejected without reason had not only been the best, he had been her only chance. When the nurse left, Linda stared at the ceiling, the truth settling in her chest like a weight she could never fully lift. She didn't just misjudge Dr. Carter. She had cheated herself. She cheated herself out of the chance to see him for who he truly was, to learn from his skill, to experience care that had nothing to do with skin color and everything to do with excellence. And now, no apology could erase what had already been done. But there was one thing she could still do. She could choose to change. Not for anyone's approval, but because some lessons are too important to ignore. As the sun set outside the window, painting the room in soft gold, Linda promised herself that when she walked out of this hospital, she would leave more than her weakness behind. She would leave behind the lie that had blinded her for so long, the lie that said worth has a color, because now she knew the truth. Real strength isn't about appearances. Real strength is standing in front of someone you once judged and having the courage to say you were wrong. The morning of her discharge, Linda sat upright in her hospital bed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The bruises from the IV were still fresh on her skin, a reminder of how close she came to losing everything, and how the very person she doubted had been the one to pull her back. Her breath felt shallow, but not from pain. This time, it was from nerves. Because before she left this hospital, there was one more thing she had to face. When the knock came at the door, Linda's heart skipped. Dr. Carter stepped inside, his expression calm, professional, as if the last few days had been just another case, just another patient. But for Linda, it had been everything. "Dr. Carter," she began softly, her voice trembling. Could I speak with you for a moment?" He stepped closer, standing at the foot of her bed, hands clasped in front of him. There was no anger in his face, no resentment, just quiet strength. "I owe you an apology," Linda said, her throat tightening around every word. "Not just for how I spoke to you, but for how I thought about you. I judged you the moment you walked in. I didn't see a doctor. I saw everything I was taught to fear. Everything I believed didn't belong in a place like this." Her voice faltered, but she pushed through. "I was wrong," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "I can't undo what I said, but I need you to know I see you now. Not the way I used to. I see the man who saved my life." Dr. Carter listened without interruption, his face unreadable, though a quiet flicker of something, maybe understanding, maybe grace, passed through his eyes. "Thank you for saying that," he said finally. "But words are only the beginning, Mrs. Whitmore. Real change takes action." Linda nodded quickly. "I know, and I want to do better. I have to do better." He offered a polite smile, but it wasn't about forgiveness. It was about reality. Dr. Carter had heard apologies before, some sincere, others performative. What mattered was what came after the apology. Before leaving, Dr. Carter paused. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And when you think about what happened here, don't just think about me. Think about why you saw me the way you did. That's where the real work starts." With that, he left the room, leaving Linda alone with her thoughts, and the heavy truth that the only way forward was to change the person she had spent a lifetime becoming. Weeks passed, but Linda couldn't shake the feeling in her chest. A different kind of heaviness than before. It wasn't fear anymore. It was responsibility. One evening, sitting at her kitchen table, Linda opened her laptop and began researching. She read stories she had once ignored. Stories of doctors of color being underestimated, over-scrutinized, or passed over entirely. Not because they lacked talent, but because they didn't look the part. She saw herself reflected in every biased assumption, every quiet insult, every moment of doubt those doctors faced, and she knew she couldn't stop at saying, "I'm sorry." Months later, the Riverside Community Foundation held its annual fundraiser, an event Linda once attended out of obligation, more for appearances than actual belief in the cause. But this time, things were different. Linda stood at the podium, her voice clear, her heart steady. "I'm proud to announce a new scholarship," she said to the crowd. "A scholarship that will help young people from underrepresented communities pursue careers in medicine." A ripple of surprise swept through the room. This was not the Linda they knew. "The truth is," Linda continued, "I used to believe that excellence only came in one package, that the best doctors all looked the same, came from the same schools, and lived the same lives I did." She took a breath, her hands shaking slightly. "But I learned that excellence looks like Dr. Daniel Carter, a man who saved my life, even after I refused to see his worth." At that moment, Dr. Carter himself stood near the back of the room, watching quietly. Their eyes met. No malice, no gloating, just understanding. He gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that growth, though uncomfortable, was possible. Linda stepped away from the podium, but this time she didn't rush to the safety of familiar faces. Instead, she walked directly toward Dr. Carter. "Thank you," she said softly. He shook her hand, a gesture that carried more weight than words ever could. "You're welcome," he replied, "and thank you for proving that change can start, even when it's late." As the event carried on, Linda stood near a table where young students gathered, all dreaming of medical careers. They were Black, Latino, Asian, Indigenous, faces that would have once made her hesitate, but now she saw potential, not prejudice. A young girl approached her. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you really think someone like me could be a doctor?" Linda knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "I don't think you can. I know you can." The girl's smile lit up the room, and for the first time, Linda understood that real change wasn't about fixing the past. It was about making sure the future looks different. As the night ended, Linda walked toward the exit. Her heart still carried regret for who she used to be, but with every step forward, she felt a little lighter, because now she wasn't just walking away from her past. She was walking towards something better, a version of herself who saw worth in everyone. Because in the end, the lesson Linda almost paid for with her life was simple. Excellence has no color, and respect is not a privilege. It's a right.